Welcome back to another edition of the Night Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie O'Leary. Got Alec Craig with us. We got Craig Epstein. The pool is full, and we will be doing a bit of a postmortem on the 2024-2025 Rutgers basketball season. Our thoughts on where things kind of stand now, how do we find our way out of the wilderness, and just general vibe checks around Rutgers basketball. And we will also discuss yesterday's pro day for the Scarlet Knights. Richie was in attendance to talk about what he heard, some interesting nuggets from some scouts he was nearby. So we'll get into that and more. But first, this podcast is once again presented to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all the madness. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting resource. From every Cinderella story to hat trick, BetOnline is you covered with the odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. So last night, Rutgers season, we think is over. We're not sure because of the college basketball crown tournament. We'll get into that in a bit. Rutgers finished the season with a 15-17 record with two top five picks, somehow producing the same exact record as they did last year with a much less talented roster. Let's go around the room and just talk about how this season went as poorly as it did, given expectations. This is a team that entered the season ranked. Preseason rankings, we mean jack shit, but we were the 24th ranked team in the country coming into the season, and things went off the rails pretty early. Craig, new guy, or the returner to the program, talk about if you had to pick a single reason as to why the season went as poorly as it did, what would you point to primarily?
I think it just comes down to the roster construction. I mean, simple as that. When you have two top players in the entire country, you would think, your job should just be a lot easier going into, years that we've had to prepare for this. You would have thought that, building a roster around not just, you see it in basketball in general, how much difference one guy can make, but you had two of arguably the best players in the country. And you've known obviously for years now. Ace committed, verbally committed after that Ohio State game. Dylan, quietly was committed for a while. That it's like, you knew what you were working with. So you would have thought that, building around those two would have made your job, a lot easier. But at the end of the day, in this world of NIL and all the craziness of college athletics now, they just did not do a good job building around these two guys. We kind of, it comes down to you read the names, you read the stats, and you kind of hope. But in some ways, the transfer portal is a little bit of like playing over like a lottery ticket. You kind of don't know what you're getting with some of these guys. We thought going into the year, a guy like Zach Martini was going to provide them with, 3-point shooting, the toughness. He do a little bit of everything there, but he really was not much of a factor, outside of a couple games here and there this season. But he really did not have much of a impact on this team. We talked, so much about PJ Hayes coming in and being that, lights out 3-point shooter that Rutgers, has been looking for and could space the floor for, guys like Ace and Dylan, but he barely played, at all at multiple points throughout the season. Jordan Durkak kind of started the year as, a guy who was making a lot of, appearances, but then as the season went on, with matchups and different things like that, he kind of found himself out of the rotation. It's just so many places you can point to, and I'm sure all of us will talk about it. The biggest culprit of it all was not getting a center coming into the season. Thinking you were okay going into the Big Ten, the land of the Giants, really, thinking you're okay with Emmanuel Agbali and a freshman Nathan Somerville, thinking that's okay. It was just wrong. We couldn't believe it then, and we can't believe it now that's what they ended up doing. But to me, that's the biggest culprit. When you have two of arguably the best players in the country, we figured the tournament was a given, but we sit here today with a team that not only didn't even sniff the tournament, probably is not going to make the NIT, and we're not even sure if they're going to get invited to this crown tournament.
Rich, your turn. If you could point to one single thing as to why the season went off the rails, what would it be?
Ooh, Let's see. There's a couple different reasons, but I'm going to go with coaching. Zero. Not like I don't think a single guy developed, to be honest, from game 1 to game, what was it, 32? 32. So it's just there's no development. There's no schemes being run. You could blame whatever you want for it, but it's just the lack of an offense. Like they didn't do anything to set these guys up for success. Like every single shot these guys were taking was contested. Ace was having to take on double teams and still would be able to put up numbers in those double teams, while other guys are just wide open at times too and just continuously miss. Like there's just nothing going on. Like PJ Hayes, like Craig mentioned, I thought he's a guy that you have to create space for. He can't create his own space. You get an off-ball screen on him, down on the corner, pop him out to that little bit of the wing spot, give him a little bit of space, and he's your best three-point shooter on the team by far. And he is in practice. You see it in practice. It's kind of insane. It's mind-boggling. Lathan came into camp out of shape. They got him in shape, which is great, but he hasn't been able to sniff anything or do anything on defense. Like he's just an awful paint protector. You saw it again last night. You saw it against Minnesota even, and they won that game, luckily. But on top of it, the lack of big man development too. Like Emmanuel Ogbol, everyone raves about. Said he's getting better. Like he's looking really good. Like everyone buys into the Pike hype, and I get it. Like he does this every year. He said Ralph G was the best offensive rebounder in the team. He what was the other? This is my best team ever last season, year before. It's just they don't come true. Antonio Chol was on the team, didn't play minutes. Now he's a top 5 JUCO. It's like what?
Yeah, I think that's a whole barrel of monkeys we can get into. All the guys who left and developed having better. A big impact.
Like it's just there's no development, there's no coaching schemes. They don't run an offense, and it's not hard to run an offense when you have two of the most talented players on the court night in and night out. But for some reason, they just weren't able to do it, and no one, like I said again, no one really progressed. I guess you could argue Dylan Grant went from not even playing a minute, which again, a coaching error. Why does he not play in those first couple games? Then all of a sudden he's your full-time starter by midseason. And he's not only just your full-time starter, he's a top contributor by far. He's a good defender, a good rebounder, hustle guy. The 4 you were missing the whole time. And he didn't play till midseason. And okay, yeah, maybe that's probably why you lost Kennesaw State. I think if you have him between Kennesaw State and Princeton, and playing him significant minutes, you probably win one, if not both of those games. Like it's mind-boggling, the decisions. And then you can't be running a 10-man rotation down deep into the season. It's just not a thing on any team. I don't care if you're Duke. I don't care if you're UConn, even Kentucky. Like they don't run a 10-man rotation. No one does. And it's lack of roster building. It all goes back to the coaching staff. And it's just lack of roster building, lack of development, lack of scheme. It's all coaching at the end of the day. And I hate to bag on Pikiell so much, but there's just a lot going on. And I just wish he would be more. The thing that really grinds my gears, I should say, is the fact that he goes in these press conferences and it's always an excuse here, excuse there.
Yeah.
Out of conference, it was tough. I thought these freshmen could handle it. They couldn't. We got the 28th class coming. Who the fuck raves about the 28th class in the country? Number one. Number two, it's not even correct. I'm opening up a totally different can of worms, but there's just so much wrong, and it starts at the top, and you got to fix that.
Yeah, when you're talking about the team's GPA after a rough loss, you have to start looking in the mirror and understand this is not what people want to hear right now. People are asking you pointed questions about decisions made in a basketball game, and you talk about the team GPA. Come on, man.
It's the highest it's ever been, Mike. Come on.
Yeah, and the defense is the worst it's ever been under you, Mike.
That's the other thing. Your bread and butter's defense, and you have one of the, top or bottom 30 in the country for defense, and that includes all the shitty schools. It's atrocious.
Alec, if you had to point to a single reason as to why this season went off the rails, what would you say?
I mean, it's been I feel like Richie and Craig have already kind of touched on a lot of the problems that we've seen. I think I would boil it down to it's a bit of a lopsided roster combined with the philosophy just being those two things combining have just put things completely out of whack. Again, this is a defense-heavy, pack line defense, funnel everything to the rim that doesn't really have a true rim protector. And then, this team, like looking at some of the metrics, they rank 272 nationally in effective field goal percentage on defense, 305th nationally in offensive rebound percentage. That was another thing. The rebounding was just so up and down for a lot of the season. And again, it's so unlike these, Pikiell teams that we've seen them be built on defense and rebounding. That's what they're built on. I don't know what that was. Anyways, yeah, we've seen them be built on defense and rebounding. We just have not seen that this year. I mean, looking at some of the other, their bottom 100 in 3-point percentage, bottom 100 in 2-point percentage on defense is what I'm referencing. It's just been a really struggle defensively, and we just haven't seen enough. I guess the word I'm looking for. I don't want to say adjustments because, again, the rotation's really been tinkered with all season long. So obviously there have been adjustments that have been attempted, but they just haven't worked. We haven't seen any tangible adjustments that have led to anything. That's anything that is a sustained period of success. I mean, this team, they won 2 consecutive Big Ten games twice all year. They won 4 consecutive games, period, once all year. It's just that they couldn't string together anything consistent. They would go from, looking at Ace Bailey puts up 37 points and you beat Northwestern on the road. Then you lose a defensive battle to Michigan where neither team can shoot. Then you come back and have one of your best games of the season against Illinois, and then you lose 3 straight to Maryland, Iowa, and Oregon, and maybe your 3 worst games of the season all in a row. So it was just consistency. That was the biggest problem. And no matter how much Steve Pikiell tried to change things, it just could never put it together.
Yeah, and you stole what mine was going to be. Mine is inconsistency. This is a team in a lot of ways. Now, if we want to talk injuries, there was a lot of stuff they dealt with, whether it be Dylan's rolled ankle, whether it be Dylan getting the flu, whether it be Ace coming into the season, missing the first few games and playing his way into shape, whether you talk about not understanding your roster well enough and not having the rotations down when the season started. Like, if you're talking about inconsistency in terms of play, you have a guy like Jordan Durkak scoring 20-some points at MSG and then scoring like 20 points the rest of the season after that. That's not literally the stats as they happen, but he barely played, and yet he's the guy in MSG. You have PJ Hayes. He played 78 minutes in the year of 2025 after playing significant minutes in the early season against the parking cones that we played. Why are you playing a guy that much if you aren't going to play him later in the season? And I realize you kind of have to learn that because these are all transfers, but I think you have to do a better job of evaluating your team in practices and in the summer. And, when these guys are all together, and Alec, you were talking about they had a 4-game win streak to start the season. If we remove the parking cone teams in the first 4 games, Rutgers had 3 winning streaks all season. So more than 1 game won in a row. And they were all 2 games. They won 2 in a row, Penn State, Seton Hall. And both those games, Seton Hall, they almost gave away. And Penn State, didn't they come back from they had like a big lead and they blew it coming into the second half?
The Big Ten opener, they were up by 15 at the half against Penn State.
That's what it was. Yep.
It was like a 1-possession game with a couple minutes left.
Immediately, in the first 5 minutes of that second half, they cut it to like single digits, or they cut it to like a single possession. Then we have the win streak, the UCLA at Nebraska game, which, looking back, Nebraska was kind of a fraud, and we just happened to be the first team to expose them. And then we have the Washington USC back-to-back wins. Like, we have 3 stints of 2 wins in a row all season against teams with a pulse. It's just, I can't believe how the season played out in terms of just the total, like, even in games, we would see these, Jekyll and Hyde, whether it be the first half, they don't show up. The second half, they look like gangbusters. The first, or vice versa. There were so many halves. Just like yesterday. Yeah. Like, we're down by 10 points at halftime. Second half, they look like a totally different team. And then down the stretch, like, I still don't know how we blew. We had the ball with 4 minutes left. We had the ball up 4 down with less than a minute left. And we somehow let them force overtime. We missed 2 free throws, and that's just a microcosm of the season. But there was just way too many times where we just found a way to turn it on. And we should have understood this with the Kennesaw State loss. We were down by 18 points at halftime against Kennesaw freaking State, the 5th game of the season. I don't know. We should have been really ringing the alarm bells when that happened, but hand up, I think thought they would turn it around, and we weren't looking enough at the evidence. If we look at the projected spreads from Bart Torvik early in the season, we were not only were we not covering, but we weren't even coming close to what the lines were set at. You look at the Wagner game, we won by 23, but we allowed St. Peter's to play us close when we were 20-point favorites in that one. Mm-hmm. Bashir, he lit us up. We had to score 98 points to make that one look like a blowout, but he scored 37 points against us. Merrimack, we were 20-point favorites against them, and their little guard, Clark, I think his name was, ended up scoring 28 points, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. It's just I guess we should have understood in November kind of what this team was better than we did, because you only really need to watch a team 4 or 5, maybe 6 games to kind of get the general consensus of what a team is. And I think we all collectively had our blinders on for the most part about the team's play and what that meant for the team's success throughout the season. And we were a bad team this year.
I think sorry to cut you off, Mike. I do think a part of that is because we've seen Rutgers start these seasons slow and get better as the season goes on. I mean, you look back at the prime example, the 21-22 season, where you lose to Lafayette, you lose to UMass, you lose to DePaul, and then all of a sudden in February they're playing like world beaters. So I think that was definitely a part of it, where we're thinking, all right, we've seen this from Rutgers before. They have the talent to put it all together, and it's still freshmen, it's still a new team, they're still gelling and all that, but then they never got out of that stage of still gelling and still putting it all together. And I feel like referring to Seton Hall as a team with a pulse was a little generous, but I understand your general point. That is the worst Seton Hall team ever. And it took a Dylan Harper heroic buzzer beater to beat them.
Yeah, I'll give that one at least an asterisk, because it's a rivalry game. It's always close for the most part. But I think they're moving to how does this get fixed? There's legitimate questions as to whether or not Steve Pikiell is the right guy for the job to lead this program. And I know that some people will vehemently disagree with that. I think how the last 2.5 seasons have gone are more than enough evidence to, ring some serious alarms. I think Rutgers in their last 60 games against top 200 opponents in Bart Torvik is 18-42, something crazy like that. And if you look at why Steve Pikiell had success in that peak year, so if we're talking 2019 to 2022, think about how those teams were built. It was all guys in their 3rd, 4th, 5th years in the program. Mm-hmm. If you look at all the recruiting classes he brought in, everybody was a hit. If you're talking about Paul Mulcahy, you're talking about Caleb McConnell, you're talking about Miles Johnson, Jacob Young, Montez Mathis, Geo Baker. If we had 12 scholarship guys, 10 of them developed into serious contributors or were serious contributors. And if you look at some of the guys Steve Pikiell has brought in recently, everybody, for the most part, has been a miss. We have entire recruiting classes from even 2 years ago who aren't even here anymore.
The 2022 class is completely gone.
Yeah. His system is all about development, is all about having guys progressively get better, learning his defensive system. But none of those guys have hit in the last 3 classes outside of the, this most recent class. So when you don't have that backfill of experienced guys in his system, he kind of short circuits. And we saw that this year when he didn't have guys who he could rely on in clutch situations to make defensive stops, especially you can't, create that out of thin air. So if you can't create that out of thin air, and it's not realistic to have guys 3, 4, 5 years in a system anymore, Steve Pikiell needs to look in the mirror and realize I need to make massive changes to how I approach not only building a college basketball roster, but how I approach simplifying systems so that you don't need to have a PhD in Pikology to play defense in a system. Because Ace Bailey is probably the most athletic player we're ever going to see in a Rutgers basketball uniform. And
Facts.
we saw that in moments defensively where he was, doing these chase down blocks, where he was just able to, close so much space so quickly defensively, but it wasn't consistent. He was not able to consistently pick up Pikiell's concepts, and he's young. I totally get that, but he had all the physical ability in the world to get his concepts down. Dylan Harper, very, very, very good college athlete. He's not an elite NBA athlete, but he is up in the top 5% of college basketball athletes. The fact that we had these athletes on the team and our defense was god awful, like, they need to understand that this shouldn't be so freaking hard. Like, you don't need to make everything so hard. And that's what we do. It seems like we can't approach things in an efficient, systemic way that makes sense. We just kind of like flail and look for something that works and try and fall back to systems that nobody knows. So I know I've said a lot here. Rich, if you were to do if you were to make one change for the better for Rutgers basketball, what would the main change be if you were in Steve Pikiell's shoes?
Well, according to Steve, he's going to change the out-of-conference schedule because it was so hard.
Oh, my God. That was another absolute cringe.
We can talk about it if you want.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So Nicole Auerbach was the sideline reporter yesterday for Peacock. And coming out of, I want to say, like the under 8 timeout of the first half or the under 16 timeout.
Something like that.
She talks about how Steve Pikiell mentioned how if there was like one thing he could change about the season, it would be how he's scheduled in the out-of-conference. And I cannot tell you how hard I hit my own forehead with my palm when I heard that.
Under 16 timeout.
Under 16.
Even worse.
So is that what you would change, or what would
No, I mean, no. I'm so against like not making the schedule harder. And it goes to show you every time. Like it was 2 years ago where they didn't make the tournament because and you can blame the MAG injury a little bit, but also because of the shitty schedule. You lose one Q3 game, one Q4 game, you're out. You're done. Season's over. You lose 12 Q1 games. Look at UNC. Final 4 in. They're like, what, 1 in 12? What are they? What's their actual thing in
Wait, according to who?
What, UNC?
I don't think they're good.
Lenardi has them as the last team in right now.
Oh, goodness gracious.
They are 1-11 in Q1. It goes to show you that. And they have one Q3 loss. Other than that, they're undefeated in Q2 and Q4. I don't think they should be in. Don't get me wrong, but the fact that people are putting them on the bubble and putting them in tells me that you're dumb for not scheduling the hardest of hard schedules. Like scheduling a Princeton and losing is hurting you. Scheduling a Kennesaw State, a mid-major, and going there is by fault. I don't care who it helps. Dumb. You already had him signed. Like you didn't need to go give him a home game too. And if you're going to do that, go play Georgia Tech. Go play Georgia. Like, don't play and tell them I'll even go to your house. You don't have to like come to the Jersey Mike's Arena. I'm going to go down there, give Ace a home game or close to home game. Go play Tennessee. Don't play Kennesaw fucking State and then lose.
2 days before you fly out to Vegas too, for that for the tournament.
But his schedule's so hard, right? I'm looking right now. What does Ken Pom have it ranked? Non-conference strength of schedule, 241. It's a dog shit schedule still. I don't care if you got the Players Era. The Players Era is the only thing keeping it back from being 300 again. It's awful. It's brutal. And don't get me wrong, Big Ten schedule, tough. Yes, I get it. What they go, 8 and 12 in the Big Ten? I forget what it was exactly, but that you did good in conference. So it really wasn't a conference. It was the out of conference that really screwed you. But
I wouldn't say they did good in conference. But they weren't awful in conference.
They weren't awful, yeah. But anyway, the thing I would change, going back to your question, I'm sorry about my little rant. You got to go out of your coaching tree. You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. In the wise words of our Lord and Savior, Greg Schiano, you have to change it up. Stop hiring guys that you know and guys. And don't get me wrong, Marlon Williamson was a little bit out of the coaching tree, but I mean, look at him now. He's probably your best recruiter too. You have to get an offensive-minded coach. You need someone in here that can complement your defensive style. You could stick with the defense. You need to hire an OC, for lack of a better term. You have to hire someone that knows how to coach an offense, someone that can go against you in practice, but even butt heads a little bit. I need someone that can just challenge me as a defensive coach. And if I'm Steve Pikiell, and say, hey, fix this, because I can't. But I can coach this defensive side, and I'm going to coach schemes of how to stop your offense. But I need an offensive stalwart, someone that knows ball better than anyone, and just someone that can complement me. And the problem with that is you're probably going to have to give them like an associate head coach title. I don't think you're going to have a second associate head coach, but I think Carl Hobbs actually had the title along with Brandon Knight last year. So I guess you could just throw a title on them and just be like, here's your money. I don't care. And it sounds like Rutgers has money to spend in terms of coaching salaries. I mean, they do at least for football. So I think if you're Pikiell, you go out and get someone that can coach offense. Was their offense better this year? Yeah, it was better. But yeah, for an all good offense, you also suffered significantly on defense. And it's also only good because you had 2 players that could start on every single college basketball team in the country. You don't have those next year. You are going to lose current pieces that have contributed this year. You're bringing in a 28th ranked recruiting class, which is a lackluster one at best. It's not great. And it's only 28th due to the fact you have 4 people. It's all based on number of commits, not based on talent.
Yeah, I was going to say, if he's going to reference the class rank of the 25 class, what was the 24 class ranked?
Oh, let me think. 2?
2? Okay.
Yeah. So I've just never heard someone rank or rave about a top 30 class, but it's just a weird thing. But it's not even top 30 by anyone. That's the other problem. One site has it 32. I think we have it 40 something, and on the other one has it 44 or 45. And you can't. We just learned this the hard way. You can't expect freshmen to contribute, let alone freshmen that are barely contributing on their high school teams currently. I saw Javonte Ware go 1 of 9 from the free throw line in the game this year in AAU. I just saw Lino Mark drop 8 points last night. I'm trusting these guys to just come in and be superstars and starters right away, because you're just asking for it again. And then your seat goes from hot to the fact that you're not even in New Jersey anymore. You're probably over in Stony Brook again.
Alec, if you were to make one change in the program, if you're in Steve Pikiell's shoes this offseason, what are you doing?
I mean, I hate to piggyback off of Richie, but yeah, it's someone that can really fix the offense. So yeah, exactly. I know the defense was the problem this year, but it's not like Steve Pikiell has simply forgotten how to coach defense. I mean, I feel like there's I don't want to say regression to the mean, but I feel like there's an adjustment that can be made to get this defense back to where, not top 10 level immediately, but at least to a baseline level where they have been for a lot of the time, and then focus on the offense, because you're not going to have the same talent offensively. So you need to find a way to scheme up good looks for a lot of these guys that just was not there and haven't been there for the last few years, really. That's the main change that I would make. And then that's not even, considering personnel changes, what you need in the portal. You probably need a lead guard. You probably need a rim protecting big. Probably need, maybe another wing. It's not even factoring in the personnel changes. So it's a long laundry list of things to do to turn the ship around.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick one, it would be kind of an amalgamation of what you guys were saying. If you're going to hire a GM, hire somebody who actually can identify talent and tell you who to recruit. Because I feel like too many times Steve Pikiell has defaulted to guys who were not hassles, who wanted to be here rather than the best players. How many times do we hear, I wanted guys who wanted to be here, weren't all about the money. Bro, this is 2025. This is what a college athlete is. They're going to ask you how much money you're going to pay. They're going to see if they could negotiate with you. It's not a burden. That's part of the job. You need to negotiate with these guys. And if you don't like that the guy comes in and asks for X amount, and the guy who was nice and cordial and gave you a firm handshake, looked you in the eyes, asked for half that, and you're like, I'd rather have that guy. Well, they better be the same level of player if you're going to take that stance, because I feel like too many guys on this roster this year were guys who were stand-up citizens or guys that Pikiell liked talking to or being around that weren't the best basketball players. Because a lot of our transfers ended up riding the pine a long time this season when we really could have used contributors. So that's be my number one thing, is just getting a guy who comes in and challenges your idea of who you should bring onto the team. Because if you're just going to hire a GM and basically not use them in a way that other teams are having success using a GM? Like, what's the point? Like, seriously, what is the point of adding a GM if you're not going to actually get opinions that are valuable from them? Greg, if you were to point to one thing, what would you do to change this program this offseason?
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to cheat a little bit here, but I think we're all just, I've seen it, whether it's on social media or us saying it, it's just we're all in agreement that the bar for this program is it has to change. It has to go get a GM to handle the money and identify talent in the portal, and also just the offensive identity. I mean, we've said it for years, and the fact that you have, I know we've heard throughout the season that this was the highest scoring Rutgers offense, ever. But it's honestly, what is that saying? Because we've shouted from the mountaintops for years about how poor this offense was. And now you got, when you have guys like Ace and Dillon, this should be your best offense that you've ever had. But we can see it from just from a game perspective. It has to be modernized. You have to find a way to really, set guys up for success. Set guys up like PJ Hayes and Zach Martini up for success. So when they come in and they're these lauded 3-point shooters, but they can't get any open looks, like things like that just have to change. So like you said, they have to find an assistant that can really run this offense so Pikiell can really fix his defense. Because we've said, I mean, Pikiell's biggest trait coming in was that he could find and develop talent through, the Geo Bakers and the Miles Johnsons, and the Caleb McConnells, where after you could develop these guys through 3-4 years, but that's just not college athletics anymore. You're basically building a team year to year. So now he has to find that GM who can identify portal talent, and he has to find that offensive guy who can develop, just an offense and just go from there. Because if like we said, if Pikiell just can't adapt to that, then maybe they will eventually have to move on.
So we've gone over a half hour talking about hoops. We've talked about a lot of things.
We didn't even talk about the game.
We didn't even talk about the game. I feel like we don't need to.
No,
I mean, it was if we saw half the games played this season, we saw that game.
Although I'll say it was weird. I saw Alec, you had that tweet about, is there a Spartan holiday coming up at midnight? It was eerily kind of similar to that first 4 game where double overtime, obviously a lot less. I guess for some, unless you were counting on Rutgers to make some type of wild run, a lot less emotions or agita going on there. But it was just weird how it was pretty similar. And I was thinking back, I was like, the yesterday's game didn't even cross midnight, and yet it's still. I'm pretty sure it started later than that first 4 game, if I remember correctly. Yesterday's game started at what, 8:30?
Something like that. Yeah.
A little bit later. The first 4 game, what time did that? I don't remember what time that game started, but
I feel like around 9. Well, I don't remember for sure.
We don't even have to talk about this game, but there is one thing I need to bring up. Not once, but twice, Jeremiah Williams choked.
Yeah, again, that's just going back to the offense and everything. Is that game on the line? You have obviously Dylan Harper on
2 free throws.
I think missed 1 free throw the entire up to that point. You have even if you want to give the ball to Lathan Somerville, they said during the broadcast he's like the 6th best free throw shooter in the Big Ten this season. And it's like, and you have the ball in Jeremiah's hands. We've seen throughout this season we've seen throughout his tenure here with games on the line, shooting free throws, that it's just he doesn't make it. I think it was wasn't it the Washington game where he had 2 free throws, and he could, if he made them both, it would have given him a 1-point lead. He makes the first one, ties the game, misses the second one, but thankfully for Rutgers' case, it bounces off the Washington guy, so Rutgers has a chance at the last shot with like 8 seconds left. They don't make it, so it goes to overtime. They win, but if Washington gets that, if that's Washington's ball with 8 seconds left, do you have any confidence that Rutgers is going to get a stop to win the game? They didn't against Michigan, and they didn't do it yesterday.
It's just Jeremiah Williams had 2 free throw attempts, missed both of them. Wild. Whatever. Go to overtime.
Not even
Dylan. I'd rather contested Dylan shot than like a wide open shot. And this isn't just singling out Jeremiah. This is singling out 99% of the team. Other than Ace and Dylan, no one else should be touching that ball at late game.
Yeah,
I'm sorry for the game winner. I'm not trusting anyone else.
In fairness, I think, well, 1, the double came and he kind of had no choice but to kick it out. And 2, I've noticed one thing, and this is not a shot at Dylan because, I mean, for all that has gone wrong for Rutgers basketball this season, Dylan Harper is probably, option past the alphabet for reasons it went wrong. Him personally,
he's
at
not
least.
clutch, but
that was what I was going to get into. I feel like he was. I saw this from Geo Baker as his career wound down. Who also, again, nothing against him either, but where the last shot kind of defaulted to him because he's done it so many times, because he has that reputation of the clutch shot maker, and putting up like the off balance shot that doesn't go in. Like I think to the Notre Dame game or some of those late games in his senior year, I feel like Dylan was kind of in that mode. He was also gassed as the game went on, so that was definitely a big part of it. Where it's just get any shot up necessary in the last second.
I pulled it up, and I don't know why he stops. Like, he should have attacked the big man one-on-one and probably tried to draw the foul here because he beat the guard. If you watch, he beats the guard, and you just go right at the big man. And if anything, the big man comes to you, and then Dylan Grant's wide open right here.
It's
not wide open, but
I think that's you hit a guy wide open in rhythm like that. That's a shot you have to make as a senior in terms of Jeremiah Williams. Like, I don't mind the pass there, but I agree that Dylan does take some wild hero style things in ISO in late games.
Yeah.
But I think far too many guys think like we didn't form a hierarchy in terms of who should be doing X in situation Y all season. Like, how many times did we see a Lathan Somerville 20-footer with 20 seconds left on the shot clock? How many times did we see Jeremiah Williams with 12 seconds left on the shot clock just start doing his and one mixtape things and fall down? How many times did we see guys like Jordan Durkak try and do the booty ball Paul move where he's just backing guys down, either drawing offensive fouls, losing the ball in traffic in the paint? Like, Pikiell and his staff clearly did not get through to these guys what the best moves should be in those situations. Like, late game, Dylan should have the ball. He might create something, driving kick, or he might take a difficult shot in the lane. This is who we need to have the ball. And I'm sure they did tell him this, but even if you did tell somebody what to do, if the message doesn't resonate, if they're not listening to you, that's just as bad as if you didn't tell them to begin with, because they're disregarding what you're saying. So it feels like there was a cultural issue on the team that we probably haven't heard about yet. Maybe it's not like a fracture on the roster, but there clearly was like some kind of disconnect given how many of the same errors we saw all season, whether it be from the coaches not correcting them or the guys disregarding them. So I hope moving forward that we can see some of that be alleviated, because I don't feel like it was like that in the past. And that's not to blame any player on the team specifically, which I want to take this opportunity to offer a sincere thank you to Ace and Dylan for taking a risk on coming to Rutgers and trying to do something that other top players haven't done in the past. Take a program like Rutgers and elevate them, make a deep run in March. It didn't work out, but the fact that they even came here, we should be eternally grateful. We should all buy whatever signature shoe they eventually have. They're going to be my 1 and 2 favorite basketball players in the NBA, probably forever.
Well, unless it goes to the Sixers, it's drafted by the Sixers, then we got a little bit of a
relax. If one goes to the Sixers and one goes to the Nets, it's going to be my favorite day ever, just to piss this guy off.
Yeah, like anybody who says anything negative about the season going the way it did because of Ace and Dylan, one, get your head examined, because they are not the reason this team didn't have success this year. And two, stop being so ungrateful about guys making the unconventional decision to come to Rutgers and try something different when they could have taken the same route that all these top prospects have taken throughout the years, going to the Kentuckys, going to the Auburns, going to these top programs who have a long history of developing and putting out NBA talent. Rutgers doesn't have that. So just thank you, Ace and Dylan, for coming and giving the efforts you did this year for this team.
I got one last thing on basketball. It's just a small thing.
I thought we were done.
Go for it.
Sorry. I did notice one thing. If Rutgers' season does continue in the College Basketball Crown or the NIT or whatever the heck it's going to be this year,
you should put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
There is one reason. There is one reason that I hope it does continue, even if it's just for one more game. A certain PJ Hayes has, I noticed, 998 points in his collegiate career. So. You know what they should do? They should have him start in the College Basketball Crown, get a basket, and then the rest of the team it's game over, season over.
And pause
Get
for
him
20
his-
minutes, give him a
Yeah.
ball, take a picture.
They might have to. They might be playing walk-ons in this tournament because the portal opens like a week before this tournament, and Ace and Dylan. Spoiler: I don't think they're going to be playing in this tournament. If I had to take a guess, maybe they do, but I doubt it. Unless there's some huge sponsorship deal in line for them to go to Vegas for another week. Like, I just why risk it? This is a meaningless.
So often this tournament.
Yeah, like why would you risk your livelihood playing Northern Iowa at noon in Las Vegas for a tournament nobody's watching? Yeah, I don't think they will. But anyway,
we'll be watching.
If they're in it for sure. All right, let's transition. I think I've exhausted all we can talk about with this basketball team this season. Well, I'm sure we'll have more on this, as over the next days and weeks. But today, no mas for me. I can't do anymore.
40 minutes of basketball might be the most that we've done this season, at least.
Yeah,
doesn't tell you how the season went.
Rutgers Pro Day was yesterday. Representatives from every single NFL team were in attendance for the first time, I think, since Schiano's 1.0 era. I think they were talking about
2015.
Yeah, 2015. So not 1.0, but decade at least. Schiano had talked about how, when he had things rolling the first time, it went from area scouts being around to head scouts to GMs to head coaches, and he's glad that that's starting to pick back up. You were in attendance, Rich.
Mm-hmm.
Talk generally about how the guys tested out. Who were some of the standout performers, and what were some of the nuggets that you heard from scouts in attendance?
I'd say Keontae Hamilton did really, really well in terms of 40 time, in terms of bench reps. I think he put up 29 when it was all said and done. Unfortunately, we weren't able to actually watch that in person because there's just not enough room in that weight room, which, whatever. It's not about us. It's about the scouts. I get it. Yada. Good broad jump. He actually had a decent vertical for someone of his size. It wasn't like, I'm not saying great by any means. I think it was 29 3/4, something like that. 9.2 broad jump. Like, he just proved he has a lot more athleticism for a guy that's a legitimate 6'3", 310, 315, I think it was. I got to pull these up actually because they have the exact 6'3", 305. But yeah, no, I thought he did really well. I thought Dymere Miller impressed a lot of people, and that's strictly because he's just fast as shit. I had a hand timed on mine 4.36. I'm gonna pat myself on the back here. I got it just the same as Rutgers did, same as the scouts did. Pretty good at doing the 40-yard dash with my phone until I did Tyrene Powell's. Then it was way off. So not important, but Tyrene Powell ended up doing pretty solid. He looked good in drills, actually moving around a little bit better. This is a guy that's been through hell and back over the past year with injuries, between the wrist injury, between an Achilles injury, between just going through the strides of rehab and just not being fully healthy throughout the season. Like, it's just been tough for him. Kyle Monangai looked good running drills. Trying to think, who am I missing? I'm missing someone. Flip Dixon was one I wanted to keep a close eye on because I wanted to see how he would test. He didn't do bad, but he didn't do great either. I'd say he was just pretty solid. He ran faster than I thought he would with a 4.58. But everything else athleticism-wise, like a 35-inch vertical is huge, a 9.8 broad jump. Desmond Igbinosun was talked about a little bit as a potential special teamer, which you can see at some levels just because of his freaky size and just his athletic ability. I think he had the longest broad jump of the day, or second longest at 10.5. The longest was, who was it actually? Shaquan Loyal. I think all these guys are going to get at least rookie mini camp invites, if not undrafted free agents. Like, Hamilton should be an undrafted free agent, if not a draft pick. Like, some really smart guy on Twitter hinted at today. Forget. But, yeah, no, I thought specifically Hamilton tested really well. Dymere Miller probably got himself into undrafted free agent / I don't think he'll be a late round draft pick. He'll probably be an undrafted free agent, but I thought guys just looked pretty good. And then the most interesting nuggets is them talking. I'm just sitting in a group of just scouts, and we're just all like BSing back and forth. And they're like, yeah, that 26 class got a couple dudes in it. I'm like, oh, who are you talking about over there? Like, I'm kind of curious. And Eric O'Neill, and I'm like, yeah, I figured that one. Like, anyone else? He goes, that Jabome kid is a fucking freaky athlete. And I'm like, really? Terry Jabome? I was like, yeah, well, I've heard it from coaches on the staff. I've heard it from now NFL scouts. So the athleticism's there. The size is there. Everything is there. It's just above the neck he's got to put together. And he started to last season. You saw it. When he first went in, it was like a deer in headlights. Once he started to figure out, okay, like he's telling me to run into this lane because that's where the running back's going. Like, yes, that's what you got to do. Like, so once you start figuring it out, like late season, you're like, holy shit, this guy's actually a solid linebacker. Like Greg Schiano found another gem under the radar. The kid was sleeping in his fucking car at a camp. Like,
Yep.
And now he's potential NFL draft pick. So a lot of hype around those two. We'll wait and see what happens, obviously, during the season. But there's a chance that Jabome could have used his last year here in 2025.
He's got 2 years of eligibility left, but I thought that was very interesting as well. Once things start to slow down for guys where you're not having, especially at linebacker, when you don't have to think about what to do and you're just reading and reacting, that's when you really look like you're playing faster. Because like you said, he is a freaky athlete. Like you don't come to camp as a rising senior and blow the staff away that much that they want to enroll you immediately. Like that is not something that happens, just so everyone's aware. Like that was clearly, they saw immediately like, oh my God, this guy is a dude. We gotta get him locked in immediately. Cause he went from camping at Rutgers, sleeping in his car because they couldn't afford a hotel for him and his teammates, to immediately transitioning that to an official visit to signing paperwork in the span of like 48 hours, which is like blitzkrieg speed for recruiting. So that'll be cool to have another story. Like Holland Pierce has one of the cooler stories in this draft. Next year's draft might be one of the cooler stories, Rutgers related as well. For those of you who are familiar with the relative athletic scores, it's something that Kent Lee Platt, aka Math Bomb on Twitter, does. Basically, he takes everyone's recorded stats and he grades you out on a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of prospects ranking at your position. So a 5 would be an average, 10 would be the most athletic prospect at the position, 0 would be the worst. Anything above an 8 is considered a great athlete for their position. Rutgers ended up having 5 guys with a relative athletic score based on their combine testing or their pro day testing above an 8.0. So those guys were Dymere Miller, Desmond Igbenuson, Shaquan Loyal, Robert Longerbeam, and Keontae Hamilton. Now, Holland Pierce didn't run enough things to, I believe, qualify for a relative athletic score. But Keontae Hamilton, a 9.01 relative athletic score. Just a really impressive 4.95 at 6'3" and a half, 305. I called my shot on Twitter yesterday. I think it might have been alluding to that, Richie. I think he ends up getting drafted. I could see him going as high as like the 5th round too.
Here it is.
Yeah, another note on Hamilton. I was listening to Stay Hot podcast. They were going through some of their top defensive tackles in the class, and I forget who they were talking about a different prospect. They weren't talking about Hamilton, but they were talking about a different prospect, and they said that Keontae Hamilton ranked, I think, of the top 5 in this defensive tackle draft class. And I believe the stat is true pass set win rate. I don't remember who they were talking about that brought up that stat, but he ranked. I mean, he was one of the better ones in this draft class in that stat and that metric. CJ West was in there too, in the top 5. So yeah, I really think Keontae Hamilton could be one of those guys that kind of comes out of nowhere, especially now that he's kind of showing out at the pro day too.
And what game was he at? Not the Gridiron Showcase.
Hula Bowl.
Hula Bowl. Yeah, he was awesome.
Showed out at that one. I think it was Brian Baldinger that actually was like really high on him.
Yeah, Baldy from day one of practice is like, this guy, Hamilton from Rutgers. And he's always grinding tape, but it was live in person. Brian Baldinger, great follow for those who like tape broken down in like digestible chunks that, you don't need to be, a football X's and O guy to get. He's a really good guy for that. Anything else coming out of Pro Day that you wanted to touch on? I know Craig did a presser after or before, I think, actually. Like
it was like during. That's what kind of annoyed me by the timing, to be honest with you. Because I'm like, I want to see what Tyrene runs. I want to see what Tyrene runs on the first one. And he's like, oh, we're doing a presser. I'm like, fuck. Come on. Like, so I got to see the second one. But Greg didn't say anything crazy. It was specifically talking about the guys there that day. I know Chris Eisman asked him about what it's like to see this kind of pro day versus like when you first came back, and it was just different. Of course, they didn't have a pro day, I don't think, when he first came back because it was COVID for 2020, 2021, or it was limited, I guess, in who can attend. So it's just a lot different. It's just see all those guys out there. It's not just one draftable prospect or like two guys. It's like a full on like legitimate like maybe three person draft class, maybe four if you're lucky, with a lot of undrafted free agents and rookie minicamp invites. A lot of guys that will at least get a shot at the league. So it is starting to develop a little bit more. You'll see it probably again next year with probably about the same amount of guys, I would think, just because like some of these transfers are already like draftable prospects. And if they have a good year at Rutgers, it's going to make them even more draftable. So it's just the start of what could just be a nice little couple of years for Rutgers in the pros as they continue to grow that branch of the tree.
You also clarified the spring schedule. What's the spring schedule looking like for spring ball?
I don't know if I could put the date out there technically, but it's the last week of March as per usual. Nothing crazy there. Multiple days per week. It's going to be Tuesday, Thursdays again. And that's going to go all the way up till April 26th, I think it is. Yeah, April 26th is the spring game, which is on TV. So, and it might be the last ever spring game. So, something to keep an eye on. And if you like that kind of thing, it might be worth you just going. Maybe, hopefully, a nice day. Get our little tailgate going. TKR partnered with XYZ Beverage Company. You'll see. Maybe I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'll have more details on that as we can, as it approaches. I guess we'll say.
Yeah. And if that gets locked in, Craig, you're in charge of working that day. I'm not.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for stepping up.
Don't worry, Richie. I'll be the designated writer.
There we go.
Thanks for stepping up.
That's good. That's very good. I like how Alec just snuck his way into drinking that day.
Yeah, Alec. Yeah, whatever. Oh, it's okay.
Anybody got any closing thoughts before we head out of here today?
I was going to say for you guys, I guess you, Mike, and I guess the Eagle fans listening, I saw Kyle Monangai participating in the Eagles Pro Day in April. And I didn't even realize that his older brother was an undrafted free agent for the Eagles.
Yep. Yeah, he had a couple good games in the preseason. Didn't make the final squad, but he had a cup of coffee with the Eagles. Yeah.
I got one more thing. It doesn't really have to do with the Pro Day, but it does have to do with Rutgers football. There's an event in the College Football 25 Ultimate Team that gives you a reward, a 99 overall for, you'll never guess which former Rutgers football player.
Ray Rice?
Is it like an obvious one?
No.
Oh, Juwan Jameson.
JT Tarkov.
Oh, Jesus.
That is a heck of a guess, but
that
no.
is a pull. What?
Speaking of which, was at the Pro Day yesterday.
Yes, that's true. He was.
Yeah. So was Johnny Langdon, which is crazy.
Yeah, there's a 99 overall Aaron Young. I have there's like a whole event in College Football Ultimate Team. It's like a bunch of collection stuff, I'm assuming, what you have to do. But yeah, I'm not really sure how that happened. But hey, shout out Aaron Young, a 97 speed, 98 Excel. Not sure how that happened, but that was pretty cool. I thought that I just saw it a little bit ago earlier today. I thought that was pretty cool.
That is something. Last thing for me, prizes have been claimed. I will be shipping out this week to the two winners, so congrats to you guys. We'll have another one soon, I'm sure, or sooner rather than later. The easiest way to get us to give out prizes is to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button down below. It's free, it's easy, it's simple, and you're going to want to stay tuned in because this basketball portal is already fucking nuts, and it's just basically low majors and mid majors entering. So give it 2 weeks, and we'll probably be talking about a Rutgers player or two or more, who knows, even entering the portal and guys showing interest. So stay tuned.
Love to hear it. Thanks for listening to close to an hour of us talking about mostly sad basketball stuff, but with football season kicking off soon, or at least the spring season, at least we'll have that to talk about the new faces. We have basketball portal season coming up. I'm sure that there's going to be changes on Pikiell's staff, so stay tuned to the message boards and your podcast feeds because you never know when the newest news item will drop, and we will have you covered like we always do. But for me and the guys, this has been another edition of the Night Report podcast. Signing off.